right, yeah, let's open up the floor here for some questions. We've got a little bit of time. Make sure
so I want to bring up, it's all interesting about the procurement process and the debriefs and all that fun stuff and the communication through that process. But the thing I'm most concerned about is the general chilling of communication between industry and government. And I've spent a bunch of years in industry and a bunch of years in government and at senior levels in both. And I can tell you that post Klinger-Cohen, this is the worst environment I've ever seen. And I'm now in government, was in industry. The thing that I'm most concerned about here is we're having this dialogue, and it's a wee bit of an echo chamber. And the people who aren't at the table are the people who are most responsible for this chilling effect. And I will tell you, those are the ethics officers, and it's the IG shops. And it's certain employees who will abuse that to put a chilling effect on management. And I've watched this happen, and it's not good. And you've got ethics officers out there who we can have this conversation as much as we want, but you've got ethics officers who are out there who are scaring the living bejesus out of new politicals, out of SESers, out of senior management through mandatory ethics training, where they will roll out. I mean, the beginning salvo of these briefings are showing headlines of people going to jail for getting too close to industry. And until you start talking about that, and until we start inviting those people to the table for this dialogue, we're not going to change anything.
So that opens it to a good question. What level of interaction are you seeing with those communities, the ethics officers, the IGs, and the general counsel?
So that's a very, very good point, and you're absolutely right about that. Anytime you go to a conference with the IGs or with the council, that's the stories that they have to tell, right? Here is something bad that happened, and here's how bad it went. Somebody went to jail, someone was fined, someone was fired, something bad, thing happened. They never bring out the stories of, look, it's something that was done where, everybody, we did have communication going on, everybody kept it fair and above board, and the procurement went perfectly well, and everything was fine. Those stories never come out and things like that. So you're absolutely right. Those are the things that the contracting officers are getting from those groups, from the IGs and from council is, here are the negative things that you need to avoid. They never talk about, here are these good things that happened, and here is something that went perfectly smoothly because they probably weren't even involved.
Well, is there an opportunity to engage those communities as you're developing the kind of training, Jose, that you were talking about earlier?
Well, what we try to do is invite them to participate while we're developing the training, and also while the training is being deployed. Because I think a lot when they sit there and they see, we've created a benign environment where we're not talking about a specific procurement, but we're creating creative interaction between industry and government. We've asked the ethics officer to sit there, or the IG to sit there so that they understand the value of it. And that's the approach that we've been taking. Now, I've been doing this it'll be a year on July 4th. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and it's going to take a long time. But that's kind of how we've done it: is create this benign environment, let them see the interaction, let them see the value to make an imprint on their mind.
Yeah, so when I was at the Department of Transportation, and if you guys are seeing now that I can't keep a job, we used to actually partner with the ethics folks to give the ethics training, the procurement shop and the ethics shop. So I think that was helpful. And honestly, throughout my career, I've worked very closely at every agency with the general counsel and the IG for that very reason. A lot of crosstalk discussion to try and get to those issues. But thank you for bringing that up. That's a very good point.
Kimberly, what are you seeing at the EEOC? Anything relative to this?
Not really with the ethics and IG, sort of scare tactics, but I will say that I think it is important for the senior executives in the agencies to model the behavior that they like to see in the subordinates, so subordinate managers and subordinate staff display. So being accessible, getting up out of your office, going to conferences, having some visibility, talking about the agency program and requirements. I think that it's really important for everyone to see that happening so that they feel more comfortable in modeling that behavior as well.
Right. It seems to maybe lead to the notion that there's some need for some other executive level conversations on this topic as well. Other questions?
On a more positive note, I helped small businesses grow and work with government. I'm a former contracting officer before the fall and while it was being put in. So we interpreted why the answer. I have to say it. I was telling somebody when I left the government, the chief counsel had no idea what the Procurement Integrity Act meant and wrote me a wide open letter, and I went to work on the RFP that I wrote and approved. So this was an interesting time. But I go out and I take on clients and I prepare them to talk to you. I prepare them to go in. There's so many people who shouldn't be working for the government. I'm sure you get all these. I tell them how to approach you all. You know, use your time wisely, how to do the materials across the board. But the PTACs, that's one group you all should be addressing. Procurement technicals, da-da-das. I go around the country and I go to their national conference, which is required training for them. And they would love to have you people talk to them about the issue. And their issues are, like it says here, why can't I talk to the program manager? I'm talking about that in November, and I'm hopefully going to have an answer for them in November. But, you know, it's that kind of training we were talking about and giving it to them because it's an eye-opener, because there's some people who can work in the government and are not doing it because they're just...
And I would also add that in the breakout sessions that we're going to be having next, an opportunity to collect even more of these kinds of ideas. So make sure to bring that up there as well. Next question.
Steve, I've got an interesting thought. Is collecting all the comments here. Do we ever do a metric to see how often we have an exchange between the government and industry workers in the workforce? And I heard a very senior procurement executive from one of our large government agencies complain that the government HR system makes it very, very difficult to hire in a timely manner. In fact, he related to all of us at NCMA last night. They said, well, you can't go out and advertise for that government position until the person leaves. And he says, thank you. He says, until your contract expires, I won't go pursue another contract for you. He said, they advertised my position that day. And once he reminded them that he was running their contracts for them, for HR, to support HR, he said, I'll give you the same treatment. And they decided they'd advertise his position. But are we measuring what the inflow is in, like, say, DHS? How many of your people on DHS acquisition staff have industry background, and how current is it? And how often are we moving people back and forth? To your point about the ethics officers, they may really, not like that rotating door, but on the other hand, if you need that sustained outreach, you need to combine the two communities without creating a good old
Even more generally, though, what kind of metrics do we use to establish the trajectory and the success or failure of an initiative like this?
So we are just creating metrics. We measure RFIs, industry days, any type of pre-solicitation conference that happens. We think those are pretty benign metrics. They're just numbers. We also measure these seminars, so we don't rotate anybody out to industry, but we've maybe brought in 150, 120 of our folks through 3 seminars, and actually they've gotten industries and perspective on the didnt process, the capture process, how they assess risk. And then we're working on, we just implemented 2 metrics. We don't have numbers for them, but this year we'll be collecting. So she mentioned the advanced planning forecast system. We have an advanced planning forecast system, and we found that it's pretty poor, we think. So what we've done is we've measured when people actually post things to the advanced planning forecast system, and when that acquisition plan or solicitation is done. We're creating a metric around that. And as we redesign our website, we're creating a metric around the number of unique visitors to the website, because we're going to use WebEx to broadcast the generic FAQ type information that everybody just quickly needs but can never find. We're going to do it via either WebEx video or WebEx radio, so that you can get it at any time. And if we can measure the number of unique visitors, at least we'll have a general idea of who's getting them. Those are some of the things we're working on. I can't say that they've been successful. And some of them we don't even have measures yet because we just implemented them.
But what about a measure of staffing for acquisition staff? How many of them have come in and out of government? And what's the time limit in government? Where if you have an acquisition staff that's only seen government, you've got a problem on sustaining your behavior and outreach. But if you have a staff that is characterized by maybe 3-year stints, it's kind of like we talk about in Congress. We'd like people to come in and serve and then leave. Just like the thought.
We have no metric. Our folks have very little industry experience. I mean, practically none. We actually looked at that, and that's why we created these seminars to give them that outlet. But for the most part, the industry experience is limited. Is it a good idea? Yes. I would probably take some.
And I'll quit here. One other idea. The United States Air Force had a program called Education with Industry for its officers. Before they came into the Acquisition Corps, they'd bring them from the line, put them out 10 months with the defense contractors. What happens if we took the Presidential Fellows Program, or as we developed our young leadership in the Acquisition Corps, we moved them out to industry for a 10-month period. They retain their government pay, but they serve in industry. And the Air Force did that. The model's there. And having went through that program myself, it was a great way to open your eyes to how the other side of the fence has to live. You could take that young woman or young man, put them out 2.5 months with BD, 2.5 months with somebody doing capture, another 2.5 months doing a large proposal, and maybe the final 2.5 months with their contracting counterpart, and roll them back through.
That's a great idea. Hey, as you and I mentioned, talked, even before this morning's session, there are people at the EA Acquisition Academy and other places that are starting to think about those things as well.
I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I understand the reasons why, but I think, and sorry, I don't want to risk taking off everybody in the room here, but does that simply, it wouldn't be the first time, but does that simply reinforce an already dysfunctional process? I mean, I think fundamentally we really have to take a hard look at how we do acquisition, and I was intrigued by the conversation that this woman over here was saying about, hey, I was here pre-FAR, and I don't know, I'm looking at outcomes, and I look at the outcomes that the Air Force has in the acquisition world. Frankly, they're not that great. And I'm really concerned about, okay, so let's look at the outcomes that we're producing through these processes. And it's great that we're measuring activity and measuring the number of contracts we have and how many are around small business. But I'm more interested in how are we impacting from a measurable perspective mission and operational performance in our agencies. That should be the metric. And I look at what you said, pre-FAR, and I'm telling you, the velocity of contracting was much greater, the level of communication. I really fundamentally think this is a symptom that we're talking about here with Mythbusters and the communication thing. And the underlying disease is much more significant that I think we really need to be tackling.
I could add one more thing to that. I just finished teaching the FAR, the Con 090, and I was actually told it was fun. Yeah, I had 6 students. I had 2 government employees with 3 years experience, and they waited 2 years to get into a class because it's 4 weeks. I had 2 contractor government employees, and I had 2 industry employees. The 2 solely government employees with a couple of years experience were just stunned at our conversations about what you could and couldn't do. Because what they had been told by their ethics people and their counterparts didn't match at all. Oh, you can interpret it. You don't have to do LPTA all the time. I was like, no, you don't. I mean, we spent more time training the younger people on what you could and couldn't do, because once you reach the contractor officer stage, it's an interpretation. If you talk to an attorney about the FAR, it's different than a contracting officer talking about the FAR. I have clients, when I do a GSA schedule, I said, if you show the reps and certs to an attorney, we're doing no work together. Because the attorney will argue commas, ands, and its. The problem, like you said, hooking up with industry is a great idea. But these guys are working, and I went around the last day class and I asked the people that were working for the government. The government guys, 3 years experience, averaging 60-hour weeks. Same with contractor employees. Where you can have the time to do it when you don't have enough employees doing the job?
Well, let me use this as an opportunity to segue here. So one last topic before we'll take a break, and then we'll do the breakout sessions. But I know that Joanie in particular has wanted to get a little bit of feedback. We don't seem to be too shy about this. This goes to this question of, so, with Mythbusters 3 or what's coming next down the road, what kind of things would you like to see OMB focus on in sort of the next component of this initiative? And I'd like to just open it up and collect some feedback, and we'll do this for a few minutes, and then we'll take a break.
So we talked about kind of one of the fundamental problems, which is culture. And how do we change that? I've really focused a lot of my consulting practice the last few months on training, and the frontline folks are the folks that I've been training. I trained about 250 people on various aspects of acquisition program management, usually about GS14s, in the field, and the feedback has been really alarming, to use the word, but certainly in line with the survey results. Why are we not doing market research properly? Same things. We can't do it. We're not allowed to do it. But more importantly, is because we'll get hammered with the protest and the risk aversion. And this whole culture of talking in industry seems to be closing. I mean, the culture is just bad from these point of views. But the important thing that I always spend lots of time with, way more time allocated to the market research portion of these training courses, is how do you get information? Because I would say about half the people in these classes have not even heard of Mythbusters and these initiatives. The other half that do say, well, I would love to do it, but I can't for these obvious reasons, but where do I go? So in my crazy world where there's no resource constraints, there would be somewhere where these folks kind of like a help desk, a hotline, say, okay, I know I need to do one-on-ones. I know I need to do these things, but I don't know how to do it. I've been advised, certainly by legal, that we can't do it, or there's a lot of constraints that make it unproductive. But we really just don't know where to go. So I always say, okay, bring the Mythbusters memos with you. Talk to legal, talk to your contracting folks, if they're program managers, or if they're contracting officers. Get involved in these initiatives. But that's big. That's the biggest feedback that I've received that I wanted to kind of give to you folks is they don't know where to go, what to do. And these training programs that I'm hearing about sound like a fantastic way to kind of break the ice. And we know training is not a silver bullet, but if there is information available out there to at least learn from and say, hey, I can do it, and here's how, then hopefully that will help start changing culture a little bit, and just step by step, I think would be very important. So I just wanted to provide that feedback that I've gotten from the folks in the field.
Thank you. So I like your idea of a help desk or hotline. What did you say your phone number was?
Well, I always tell the students, hey, if you have questions, let me know. And I do actually get some emails like, hey, I've got this issue, what do I do? And I say, look, Mythbusters, one-on-one, here's where you do it. You're allowed to do it. Part 15 and Part 10 say do one-on-ones and market research. So you certainly have the tools available. But they just don't know how. There's no real foundations for here's how it would be productive and here's how to do it. So that's definitely something I think that would be helpful.
So I guess I'm a little embarrassed to say that when I read about this forum today and jumped on the opportunity to sign up for it, it was probably the first time I had ever heard of Mythbusters. I've been with GSA almost 5 years. I'm new to Schedule 70, but I came from the Public Affairs Office, so I'm a communications person. That said, GSA communications I should have known. Why didn't I? And that's the question that is burning in my mind right now. Why didn't I? Why, as a communicator, had I not heard about this? Is that my fault for not digging and looking for it? Or is that Mythbusters because I hadn't heard about it more? I had heard about GIACT. I've seen Dan Brown speak. I'm sure I've heard him mention it when he talked. But why didn't I know more? And I'm fascinated at the concept, and I'm intrigued when I listen to the questions about ethics. When I was working solely in communications, nearly everything we did had to go through ethics and the lawyers, and they would squelch the ways that we talked about things. So absolutely, there's a lot of that care and caution about not only talking to vendors and to industry, but about vendors and industry.
I'd just like to kind of follow up on that idea of, Mythbusters is, or 2 memos, but a memo, is not reality. And it really needs to be a campaign. And it's an ongoing campaign. The infographic that we all, received today is a great tool in that campaign. I think the EEOC requires that every employer post a poster about what your rights are in the workplace. Maybe the infographics needs to be posted in every procurement shop, so that the people that work in that procurement shop kind of get intrigued, see the ideas there, and go look for the memos, and then start asking questions.
Probably have time for one more.
Thanks. Gentleman to my right here mentioned that one of the problems is deputy attorneys and the ethics people squelching all the good efforts. And my suggestion is, let's say that that's correct, and it's a common problem throughout all agencies. Everything we do is good, but it's always going to stop short of being fulfilled based on a small group of people that are in a position of authority that have the ability to squelch good efforts. Perhaps one of the next steps could be, what can agencies do to bring those people on board and educate them so that they won't stop the good efforts about enhanced communications?
So maybe that's the community to be targeted.
Well, maybe, it could be, and Jose, you made a great comment earlier about how you try to include these people. Well, how many of them actually show up? So if you try to include them and they don't show up and they go off and do their thing anyway, then that's a problem that has to be solved.